everyone. I've talked a lot about movies that evolve around heroes trying to save the world, or, movies about these people that need to save someone or an entire population. It's hero stories. It's stories of heroic folks we love to root for, who have a motive, who have goal, who have tons of personality traits to them, and lots of depth. Well, what about I go ahead and review a movie that doesn't really do much of that, and is more so just a fun crime psychological story about a simple man who gets involved in so much crap, and then there's just so much violence involved, and just a movie that's all about straight up random violence. I want that. I'm not talking about horror movies. No, no, just a crime film, a gangster story, a psychological type of film, one that just has violence surrounding it with simple characters, crazy situations, and nothing of the sense of a story that's quite insane. Just something realistic, something that's realistic and features as much violence as it wants. I like that. I like those kind of movies. Don't want to sound dark for saying that, but I just love to see films like that that are realistic but still have enough violence or messed up characters to make it fun. And that's what I was going in for with this movie. Caught Stealing. I knew that this was a story that was going to have violence and very insane situations with fun characters that are pretty messed up but still enjoyable. And I definitely knew that a movie like that would be fun to watch. Good old director Darren Aronofsky, who I have not seen any other of his movies for. I know he's a popular director. Films like Requiem for a Dream, I haven't seen that. More so, this is pretty much the first movie he directed I've seen. Maybe. I have to look again. But overall, of course, wanted to see this film because, like I said, it's a good little violent crime story, and those are always fun to watch. I like to see which ones come out every year and which ones I am interested in, depending on how violent they could be or how messed up the characters can be. Those are the two main aspects to what would make a crime film so much fun to watch for me. So, naturally, I went to go see the movie, and to look back, let me go ahead and answer this question. Was it violent enough? Were the characters bad enough? Wasn't enough for this movie to be fun to watch and a damn good film? Let's take a look. So first, of course, let's go ahead and talk about the movie's three genres that it focuses on. Comedy, crime, and thriller. How do each of those genres handle in this film? Well, first, let's look at the comedy in this movie. Some would look at it and think, how much of a comedy is this? Well, more so, it's a dark comedy. A dark comedy is essentially a film that has its funny moments, but mostly are funny moments during, quite frankly, pretty messed up scenarios. It's like you have comedy in the movie, but they're not in the most sensitive, positive types of environments. It's comedy that you get during something violent, messed up, or just probably not something you usually would laugh at in real life. And that's what this movie has. It has those fun comedy moments that are shown in the most messed up places. Though, then again, it's more one of those cases where it's comedy that just takes place at random times. It's like the comedy you expect from a Marvel movie. Marvel movies tend to like to use comedy in random bits. I mean, unless it's Guardians of the Galaxy or Taika Waititi's 4, they'll just throw comedy at random moments and instead of really having the story rely on being a silly comedy in general. And that's what this movie does. It's a crazy serious story that's pretty realistic and whatnot, yet there is comedy in it. It's just during small little bits of the film. I mean, to be fair though, I guess you could argue the characters are pretty comedic as well. I think there's this cat that our main character has who kind of takes up some funny moments. I guess more of the comedy is just from how much crazy shit the cat gets involved with. Man's in trouble. There's people after him. He always has his cat by his side. Doesn't do much. He snatches at some people, but other than that, that's really about it. He doesn't really do much damage. It's just, oh, look, a cat. I mean, hey, I like cats. I'm a dog person, but I do like cats, so it's always fun to see another fellow cat lover in this movie that's not a woman. Other than that, I probably would argue that's not really that big of comedy, because honestly, while the whole catch stick of there being a nice innocent cat involved in all this danger, it gets that part of comedy gets a little stale as it goes on. Some of the better comedy comes from the characters. We have this one British Scottish dude named Russ who has this insane mohawk, like so over the top. I don't know how people can live with a mohawk like that, but it's not just his design that's funny. I mean, his most of his dialogue and acts is something you'd see out of a Guy Ritchie film. From he's basically like Jason Stratman in this movie. Where he has one-liners or says silly things from time to time while still being a badass. That's basically what Jason Stratman is. And he pulls it off nicely in this movie. I do like the sort of vibe he has in this film, but at the same time, again, his comedy is goes here and there. He's not full on hilarious, but his mohawk design is funny, and he has some fun quips from time to time. There's a bunch of random bits of comedy. Like I said, it's mostly just bits surrounding it. Yet the movie is described as a comedy, so I guess the reason they're calling this a comedy when the bits of comedy in the film are along the lines of non-comedy action movies, I guess more so just has to do with how ridiculous the story plays out because it is put out in a pretty silly manner. I mean, the plot is serious, but there's a lot of silliness involved with how things are played out, how much random crap goes on, and what characters are involved with this. There's like a neighbor that seems to randomly pop up at times and is like, well, what the hell is going on here? That's fun. It happens a few times and it's pretty funny then. There's like I said, there's the cat that ends up being part of all this. And our main character seems to have a lot of normal things to him that you wouldn't expect from an action hero, but apparently he has to be, so it's one of those kind of characters. All right, so that's enough of the comedy. What about the crime in this movie? How does the crime work? Well, the crime story is essentially about, as the plot described, it's stealing, isn't it? Well, it's kind of hard to put in words. This is one of those crime stories that's easy to watch, but not easy to fully understand and explain. I kind of have a hard time with many crime films because it's kind of hard to explain the crime in general because like you're not one who knows everything about what kind of crime that these criminals want to put up against. Like a simple robbery, murder case, those I can work with. But this movie throws a lot to it. It's murder that happens. It's stolen money. There's a key that gets stolen that our main character has to strive for. And that's pretty much the three main elements of crime I got from this movie. Stolen money, a stolen key, and tons of murders. This movie plays out all those crime situations, and I like it. Even if it's not the easiest to understand altogether, there is still a good sense of how dangerous this stuff can go for. And if the crime is able to play out in a way where it all seems incredibly dangerous for our leading characters, I think that's still a pretty damn great crime story to me. And yeah, this movie's a great crime story because, the crime is random to my eyes, but for the most part, it's all played out in the right kind of violent manner you want from a kind of film, or at least what I would want again. So yeah, there's stolen money that our protagonist seems to get wrapped up with. He has all these guys who help him with murder that he doesn't want. And of course, he has a key for his bar that ends up getting stolen that's pretty much one of his motives for setting for all this. I'll talk more about that when we get to the story, as always, but for now, I'll just say that this, in terms of crime, even if it's not the easiest for me to play out, like if I was a detective, and I had to investigate what the crime was for this movie, I would suck. But it had enough violence and insaneness to it to make it pretty great. All right, so for thrillers, well, this is a thriller movie. There's suspense in it. Where is the suspense? They're in the car chases. Well, let me rephrase that. There are chase scenes in this movie, mostly during the final act, and they are pretty good chase scenes. I'll give you that. I think that's one of the biggest things that a thriller movie has to work as a thriller, just chase scenes. But to be fair, if the chase scene plays out to where you actually are going alongside this character, like you see this character trying to run away and you're really trying to work with him because you get as scared as he is with the people chasing him. I've seen that in a lot of movies. Any thriller that has that kind of chase scene where I'm as invested with running away from these people as the protagonist is, I think I'm sold. It's a great the suspense is great. And yeah, that's what this movie has. It has a few moments where our protagonist is trying to escape these fellas, and there are times where feel the suspense he feels. Sort of. Not as much as other thriller movies, so I guess that's kind of a thing. But the chase scenes in this movie are thrilling enough. And even outside of chase scenes, the sense of terror that we have with this character. He's obviously not meant to be some big action hero. He's just a normal bartender. And of course, he's wrapped up with all this crap, so it's one of those kind of films. A kind of film about a simple man wrapped up in crap. And that's what this movie provides with us. And boy, I tell you, it's pretty nice. It's pretty fun. That's pretty fun to see. Seeing how tough a man who doesn't think he can be tough can go. Naturally, our leading protagonist has that. And the suspense in this movie, again, mostly comes from the final act where there's all those chase scenes, or even just the chase scenes we get somewhere in the middle of the film. But they're all fun chase scenes. There's enough danger, destruction, nonsense, violence to it that makes it fun and suspenseful. Any movie that has chase scenes, honestly, makes it pretty good as a thriller. So that's probably the best way to describe this movie. Because it has chase scenes, it's a pretty good thriller. Now to the part that everybody hates me doing on these reviews, explaining the story. I remember when I did my Nezha 2 review, I had a hard time perfectly analyzing the story from top to finish, and I think I remember there's this one comment that literally acknowledged that I did a terrible job at analyzing the story, mainly because I don't have a script. Well, I'll try my hardest. This time, this movie, I can maybe explain the story a little bit better. I can point out details with the story, as it's not as chaotic or hard to put together as Nezha 2, so that's probably a good sign. Caught Stealing. This is a film that takes place in the late 90s, because being a crime film, it only makes sense that it would take place at a older time period, or even just if you want your movie to be great nowadays, it has to take place in the past. So that's what we have. We have New York City in the late 90s. So that means there's going to be shots of the Twin Towers. And there are. There's a couple of shots featuring the World Trade Center. Honestly, it's kind of like the only reason we have these shots is to tell us, hey, this was 90s. This was before 9/11. You get that? You got that? There are a couple shots for that. I kind of find that funny. Anyway, the story, a former ex-baseball player. A man who is a huge baseball fan like I am. So it's always great to meet another fellow baseball star. However, he is a fan of the San Francisco Giants, even though he currently is now living in New York City, which is a little confusing, but hey, what works for him, I guess. I root for a New York team, even though I live in North Carolina, but then again, there's no North Carolina MLB team. Anyway, let's get on track. So our story involves an ex-baseball player who's now currently working as a bartender. He already has trouble with his bartending duties, but he makes him work as well as he can for the city he's in and the time period he's in. And then a bunch of shit happens when a bunch of random people have him tangled up in this situation where he has to try and survive with all the criminal understudies that are going on during this time. This includes two Jewish people who, forgot to mention in the comedy section, are a pretty good staple of the comedy. I'm not saying Jewish people are funny, but the way this movie portrays them, it's pretty amusing. Then there's this, of course, like I mentioned, the Scottish-British dude with the mohawk who tries to get with him during all this. He has two Russians facing him, one Puerto Rican, played by Bad Bunny, who I sort of got mixed up with Fred Armisen at first, but anyway, and a detective played by Regina King. All this that he has to get strangled up with. It's now about surviving, and that's what the film is. It's a man who loves baseball, but now has to survive from all the crime that's happening in his area, and the crime that he seems to get tangled up in. Like I said, it's one of those random dude gets tangled up in serious crap kind of stories, but I do like sort of where it goes with it. we think that this is gonna be this man's gonna end up being the ultimate new action star. It's like, I don't know, it's like a John Wick kind of thing. But at the same, not entirely. It follows him going along with it at times. He does start to get more into it as the film progresses, but by the time we get to the end, it kind of just goes back to him regularly. He's not the same man he was before, obviously with all the stuff he's experienced, but it doesn't end with him holding guns and being like, I am. I'm saying, you know what I'm saying? Now, and more so, as it goes on, you still know that he's just a regular person. He's not trying to be a superhero or anything. He's just trying to get through all this and survive. There's even times where he feels too emotional. I'm not saying heroes aren't allowed to be emotional, but the way his emotions are played out at scenes in this movie do give you the illusion that he is not meant to be some kind of superhero or action star. He's just a regular dude in a regular city. This is all just regular stuff happening, except we have guys with silly mohawks, two awkward Jewish folk, and not the kind of stuff you usually expect in your everyday crime story. But when you have all this stuff happening, you obviously know the only thing you can do is do whatever you can to survive. And that's what he does. Tries to survive. He even ends up doing some murders himself. There are people that he experiences get killed along with people he sort of kills. I don't think he does as much killing in this movie as you would expect, but I do like the narrative we have with him. We follow him. We don't have to feel inferior to him, nor at the same time do we have to say we're better than him. We just have to know that he's someone that you can put your situation in. It's that kind of film. Now, you could argue, what does that mean? This is going to be like the movie Nobody? I did recently watch Nobody. I didn't see the sequel. What if I told you I hated that movie? I don't want to get too off topic. I didn't like the movie Nobody. Let me just talk about that. Nobody was a movie that people consider to be a pretty great action comedy type of film. I don't know. I didn't get into it that much. I didn't like it. I just feel like that they kind of didn't go in a fun new route. It just felt too plain and simple, and you could argue that I'm wrong about that, but I didn't really get any fun vibe with it. The character wasn't interesting. The story didn't really have a fun new route to it. It just felt basic and dull. Well, this movie is different than that. Cut stealing doesn't do that. It doesn't make the whole normal guy gets caught up in crap basic and dull, because they have it set in a time period. They make it so that our character isn't an average family man. He has a cat. And naturally he finds more people who go against him or join aside him. And at the end he finishes off by taking a nice vacation. I mean, I guess that is how a lot of action movies about these kind of things end. But hey, we do get a fun twist at the end. He apparently has been talking to his mother, who we find out at the end of the movie is played by Laura Dern, and he gives her a big package, which happens to be millions of dollars that were eventually stolen. And to be fair, I think she does deserve that money. I mean, I feel like that's all the money that she deserved from the Jurassic World movies, as I feel like she wasn't getting paid enough for those films. But anyway, like I'm saying, the story, it does take a nice fun route. It goes and it ends. And, it doesn't get too plain and basic because it feels realistic enough to work, but it also is silly enough for us to know that we shouldn't be scared that this will happen to us. It had to be seriously unlucky or ridiculous for a bunch of people like these in this movie to do this. But I think that's kind of part of the fun, how ridiculous its setup is. And I like that. I like that they're able to make that part of the fun. So yeah, I gotta say, the ridiculousness and the seriousness combined with this film makes it pretty fun to watch. I overall will think that Caught Stealing is not one of the best crime films ever. Not one of the best suspenseful comedies I've seen. It's a pretty good film. It's not one of the best movies this year, but I will give it a 7 out of 10 for being pretty good. It's got a lot of nice crime to it. The comedy is worthwhile bit, and you do get some suspense with what we have. At the same time, though, I will say the story wasn't the easiest to work alongside. The comedy was good, but not enough to really give the movie as much of its own fun to it as you would want. And I guess while the characters did have a fun sense to them, they weren't as interesting enough for me to really get as invested with this as I could. But I still did. The characters may not have been great, but they were still good enough to work with the story. That's really the only fault of this movie. Lack of um, the lack of consistent comedy and sort of the lack of that much investment with the characters. The one character had some investment, but it really wasn't enough to fill the story worth. So yeah, those are my flaws, character wise and comedy wise. But aside from those two things, the rest of the film works pretty nicely. If you're into crime stories, if you love a good silly concept done in a fun way, you definitely should enjoy this movie. As someone who loves both crime films and comedy movies, and even suspenseful films too, that's all three genres of this movie, and those are all three genres I love. So if you love those genres as much as I do, you definitely should see this film. It's not. It probably You probably won't see it as one of the best crime comedy or thrillers of all time, but you should still have fun with it, because I sort of did. And yeah, I do hope to see more films like that in the future. Films where we have a bunch of violence and characters who we're not supposed to be like, "Ooh, you're a hero." You're supposed to be like, "Ooh, this is badass." That there's a difference with that, and I love to see more of those. Or more so, how about just stories where all of our main characters are bad guys, and not like the bad guys where it's like they become good. No, just a whole story of bad people who stay bad people, and essentially are characters we don't need to root for throughout the story. We just need to see as much how much crime they get away with or what they do. That's the kind of film I love to see. That's not 100% what this movie was, but it did sort of remind me and give me a good idea to explain to this channel for a review of how I like those kind of movies. So now you know. You're watching a guy who loves to watch violence and bad people on TV.